4 years. Actually 4 years and 5 months ago, I did a video all about the Arturia KeyLab Mark II. So now Arturia have updated to the Mark III, and here it is. Let's have a look at the keyboard itself, and let's have a look at what it comes with. Now, for the purposes of this demo, I've put the keyboard on this part of the desk. I've not put it on the keyboard tray because you wouldn't be able to see it. This is the 61 note Mark III. You can get the 49, and you can get both in black and white. Be aware, if you get the 49, then this section here actually drops down and it's just here. Now let's start with the keyboard. The keyboard bed is a redesigned keyboard bed for the Mark III. It's a semi-weighted key bed built from a high construction, which has a synth action feel and also has channel aftertouch. It feels really, really nice to play, and you get that resistance. I think that's quite nice. It's still synth action though. It's not going to feel like you're playing a piano, but you've got that sensitivity, which I'm really happy with. Now I'm going to switch it on, and it's actually controlled through USB-C, and that's directly going into my computer. Let's have a look at the back before we carry on. Now, if you have a look at the back, this is USB Type-C as opposed to B on the Mark II. You do have a mains in, so if you didn't want to use it with a computer and you're just using MIDI, you can use it as a MIDI controller on stage as well as in your studio. It's 12 volts, 1 amp. Be aware of that, and you don't get the power adapter with it. You have to buy that separately, but just be aware you can do that. Most people will just plug it in by USB Type-C and plug it into their studio. You have traditional 5-pin DIN MIDI, MIDI in and MIDI out, and then you've got sustain, expression, and OGS in. And that's it. If you actually have a look at that compared to the Mark II, there's more on the Mark II. You've got a couple of different OGSes, and you've got CV in and out. So they've taken the decision to take CV out of this completely. If CV control is something that you really, really want, I'd highly recommend looking at the Mark II. And I've got a video all about the Mark II. I'll put a card up about that there. Now there's loads of controls on the top. Some of them are brand new, including this one, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But let's start over on this side, starting with our pitch wheel and mod wheel metal construction, and then we've got transport buttons for both up and down and octave buttons for both up and down as well. Again, the 49 note, this section is here, and that's actually really nice because while you're playing, you've got real control. You don't have to reach a little bit further on the 61 note. Not that that's a bad thing, it's just the way it's designed. Moving over to this section here, we've got the pads, and we'll talk about the pads in a second. We have bank up and bank down for the pads. We've got settings for the Arturia itself. We've got program, and we've got MIDI channel. Now you can change the MIDI channel from 1 to 16, as you can always do with most places. But the nice thing as well is we can change the MIDI channel of the keyboard and have a separate MIDI channel for the pads. That's really handy if you're playing drums and it's also at the same time playing a bass note, which you don't want it to do, so you can actually separate them as well. By default, they are the same, so you might need to change that in your settings. But let's talk about these pads. Now, on the Essentials Mark III, you get 8 of these. On the KeyLab Mark II, you get 16 pads, and on this one, you get 12. So you are missing 4 pads from the Mark II to the Mark III, but let me tell you right now, I would much prefer to have these ones. These are the 12 touch and pressure sensitive pads that are the kind of next generation. They're quite hard, they're not squishy, a little bit squishy, but not too much, but you can push into them and they've got a little bit of flex, but they're really robust. Again, as I said, you've got 4 banks of these, so I'd much rather have the 12 of these than the 16 on the Mark II. In fact, when I did the video review of the Essentials Mark III, again, I'll put a card up, I was talking about these pads and kind of wished they were on the Mark II, hence why they are now here on the Mark III. Now moving over to the controls section, if you're familiar with the Mark II, then you might notice there's a couple of buttons missing, but they're not missing, they're actually here, and they're built into the software as and when you need them. But we'll go into that later. So you've got hold, chord, scale, and arp, save, quantize, undo, and redo, and these obviously integrate into your digital audio workstation. Now you need to download the script for the workstation you have of choice, so you can tell the workstation what this is, and it understands what the keyboard is. On the Mark II, we had 6 transport buttons, we now have 8. So we have stop, play, record, tap tempo, which actually is very useful. You've got metronome on and off, forwards and backwards, and then loop or cycle, depending on what you call it on your digital audio workstation. Now, I'm going to skip over the screen section just for a minute because really that is the main part of this, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to go over to here, the faders and the dials. Now, if you're on the Mark II, or if you have a look at the Mark II, something is missing, and there actually is a series of buttons just underneath here on the Mark II. When you use those, they were just select. So they were select 1 to 9, or in Arturia's world, they were actually brass, bass, piano, strings, lead, and there were selections for categories. Now, you haven't got them missing. Again, they're here, and it changes depending on what's going on the screen, and I'll go into that in a minute. But these are brand new dials and faders. Now, they have limitless control, they're 360 degree, there's no clickiness to them, which I like, and the faders, they have a little bit of resistance, but they glide so incredibly well and silently. But the new thing about them, they are touch sensitive pads and controllers. So these actually, you can just touch the top of them and it'll tell you a bit more about that fader or that dial, and that works really, really well in Analog Lab Pro. So let's move over to the main part. Now, I've switched it on and you can see it says, welcome, what do you want to do? And you've got Arturia, use and control an Arturia plugin. You've got user, and you can completely customize this. Maybe you're not using this with Arturia's plugins, maybe you're using this with an iPad and you want to use a AUV3 plugin and control a drum set. Well, you can do that, and you can change the CC numbers and completely customize it here. The other one you've got is DAW. So you can download the individual scripts for lots of different things, whether it's Ableton, whether it's Cubase, whether it's Pro Tools. I use Logic, so I've downloaded the script for Logic so I can tell Logic what this is so it understands the button presses. And this screen comes up when you very first turn it on. You can see it says show this screen at launch. You can turn that on and off. There is a dial here, as you've seen me use. This is also clickable as well, and there is a back button. So we're going to click this, and it's now saying Arturia program. It's waiting for a Arturia program, whether that's a plugin, but the one we're going to use today is we're going to use Analog Lab Pro. This is the software you get when you buy this. Think of it like their greatest hits catalog that you can grab loads of different sounds from. In fact, there's over 2,000 sounds spread across 39 different instruments or synthesizers or plugins. On top of all that, they actually give you a couple more things. So they give you Mini Vive, they give you Piano 5, and they give you augmented strings bundled in with this as well. So the way this works is really clever, and I really like the integration. So what we're going to do right now is launch Analog Lab Pro, which is their keyboard anthology, and then we'll go into it and show you how this works. Then I'm going to launch Logic Pro and show you how this works with a DAW. So now I've booted up Analog Lab, you can see the keyboard's changed. It's just changed automatically. I didn't do anything. It just went to the last sound that I was messing with in Analog Lab Pro, which was 2 manual organ. Now for this demo, what you're hearing is the sound coming through my Mac, and it's picking it up on the microphone. We're not here today to go through the sounds per se, we're here to go through the integration of this keyboard. What's really clever is I can just use this dial and I can just start scrolling through, and look, it's automatically moving Analog Lab Pro on the Mac. And this works with PC as well, don't worry. But that is a lot of sounds to scroll through. So how do we narrow this down? Well, we use these buttons here. As you can see, these have come alive. We can favorite a sound, we can go up and down, or we can scroll, or what we can do is we can search. If I click this, it starts searching and it changes on Analog Lab here. You can see it's got the main types. So we've got the bass, the keys, the lead, the pad, the piano, and it's here. If I move it across, look, it's actually moving it on the Analog Lab Pro, which I love. I think this is great. And this reminds me of Astrolab. Astrolab is Arturia's performance keyboard. Think of this with all of that built in, with all the sounds actually built in, all the different engines are inside. But this actually is working just a little bit like Astrolab, really. Obviously the UI is slightly different, and you can also go to your liked here. We can go to banks, genres, instruments, types. So let's go over to pianos, and we'll just pick a piano. We'll go to acoustic pianos. We've got acoustic grands here. Let's just go over to American Small Studio. Now, it's not live right now. You have to click it and it needs to go blue. Once it's blue, it's live. So that sensitivity on the keyboard is really, really cool. Now have a look at Analog Lab Pro. What it's got underneath there is I can edit the preset. I can go into the preset itself with my mouse, and that's all fine. So if I go into editing the preset, I can do, no problem at all. But if we go back here, I don't need to use the mouse at all. I can go into it here, and you can see that the faders and the dials have started to match up. So we've got low EQ gain, we've got band 2, we've got high, we've got mic 1 gain, mic 2 gain, mic 3 gain, mic 4 gain, and then we've got the brightness here, and we've got the timbre. One thing I really like about this is if I just tap this without moving it, do you notice it? First of all, it comes up with what it is here, and then also it comes up in the bottom corner. I'm pointing, sorry. It comes up in the bottom corner what the actual value is. Really powerful, and it's taken me a little bit of time to get used to that. I can just tap and go, oh, okay, that's 0.622, and I can move it accordingly depending on what I want. Now I'm just on piano right now, and you can see we've got an asterisk because I've made some changes. Let's go over to something a little bit more complex. So let's go over to something that's in sequence, and then we can go all. Let's go over to something like that. So you can see now on Analog Lab Pro on the screen, we've got cutoff, resonance, LFO filter, chorus mix, phaser mix, and then we've got our faders here. We've got the decay. So if I go, I can very quickly adjust stuff right here, and I can just tap to see what it is. Now the first 8 faders are, and the first 8 dials are the actual controlling, and then normally dial 9 is the main control there. If I want to edit this, 3 little dots at the top, go into there, and you can now see that is the same as me clicking edit preset on the screen. So I've got the controls here for the main part of the controls. I can add a second part, or what I can do is I can play around with the keyboard settings. So we can do this all here without having to move around on the mouse. I can do it all on the keyboard. It's very tactile. Now to get out of all of these, it's just the back button. So we can just press the back button and that's fine. So I can go into different things. So let's go into strings, because one of the things you get with this is you get the augmented strings, and they're really, really good. And if I go into all, we can go through. Let's try and find 1 or 2 of them. They're normally these ones. There we go. So there's 90 Insomniac. If I want to go into stuff via a different way, I can actually go into here. You've got types, you've got instruments, genres, and banks. So I can go into instruments. So we can actually go into the augmented strings there. Now we're in all augmented strings. So you can see it's all got the same kind of icon. So if I go over to, let's do clean sweep. Let's see what that's like. Now the thing to remember is while you're scrolling through, I'm still on that clean sweep. So I have to click it to then load it up. So from the keys to the pads, let's talk about them. So these are, as I said, 12 velocity sensitive, touch sensitive pads. Now that's C2. If I proper bash it, I'm trying to press it as little as possible. Get down to about 3. 1! I got to 1. There we go. So they're really sensitive and they're really, really good. Now, obviously bank-wise, I can go up. And you can see the banks there. We've got A, B, C, and D. And this is really, really cool because if you've got sounds that are obviously preloaded with Arturia, then you can do them here. Or if you've got drum sounds, this will come into its own really, really well. Now I'm going to quit Analog Lab, and you can see as I quit it on the computer, the keyboard goes Arturia program. So what we can do is we can, if you want to, press program, and you can change between Arturia and DAW, or you can go into the settings and press the settings for the global settings. For example, I've got a sustain pedal and annoyingly it has a negative positive polarity, so when I press it, it's always the other way around, and I've gone into the settings here and changed that. So let me now show you what happens to this if I'm just basically still back in Arturia, and that's just the way it was. If I go to Logic Pro, I'm going to boot Logic Pro up, and I'm going to boot up a blank project. Now I am going to use Arturia's system, so let me just go into empty project, and it's going to ask me what do we want. So we want not Alchemy, we're going to use Arturia, and we're going to use Analog Lab 5. There we go, and just click create. So once we do this, look at that, straight away you get a bit of a flash, and it's booted it up, and we're in. Now we're in the DAW now, so you can see these have lit up. So we've got the stop, the loop, so I can turn those on and off. And if you have a look at Logic right now, that's working. If I stop, if I hit play, if I stop and double tap, or if I do this and if I click over, I can go up and down, no problem. But we've got our instrument here, and that's fine. So again, I'm just going to go through what we did before with your Analog Lab Pro. Let's get some cool pad sound. Let's do that instead. That's fine. Let's go with, what's that one like? That's too dark. Let's go through a journey. That's cool. So I can just hit record. There we go, we've just hit record. Now I haven't touched the mouse at all at this point, and I'm just going to click to cycle that. Turn the metronome back on. Oh. That's really cool. So instead of having to go, oh, let me just click things, let me grab the mouse, I did it all here, and it really easy. Now I've just changed this over to a piano just to show you a couple of things. You can then here, let's change over to the piano, and that's fine. This is a great way of just going, actually let's change the sound. What does it sound like with this or this or this? And you can do that right here. We've got the hold, which is obviously your sustain. We've got the chord mode. And you can see it says long press to edit. So if I hold that down, I can then say create a chord set. We can go into major, minor, sus, diminished. There's so many different ones. And you got the strum. So if you want it to actually strum through. If I go over to this one and go, let's go to major. I'll go to play with the strum. Whether it's going up or down. Then you've got scale, so you can change the scale. So I can't play a wrong note, which is really clever. And of course you can turn that on and off, change what kind of scale it is. And then you've got the ARP. So the ARP, you need to be aware of the ARP basically when you go into it. If you hold it down, even if it's in sync USB at the moment, you have internal and you've also got MIDI. So depending on your digital audio workstation, whether it's sending information out, whether that will match or not. So you have to be careful with that one. Then you've got things like save, quantize, undo, and redo. This is for your digital audio workstation. We've gone over obviously the controls here, and we've gone through the sound. But there's one other page that we've not gone through, and that's actually the page of your digital audio workstation. If you click back, you can see that it says Untitled, and that's the name of the track, and then what it is using. So it's using Analog Lab 5 stereo, and we've got mute, solo, and record. These are the buttons that were missing on Mark II. It was like, well, they're here, and that is really handy. I like the fact that that's right here. Let me just very quickly add a couple of different tracks. So I've just very quickly renamed these, and now what you can see is when you scroll through, you can see it's actually changing which one you're on, and you can see which one it is, and you can also see what it's using. So if I say Mini V4, if I click that, we're now in the Mini V4, and it's asking me, do I want to do a tutorial, because I haven't launched it yet. So I can scroll through and go through the Mini V4 and go through all the different bits that are inside it. So now I can go through these parts. So let's just go through piano, and we've only got one, which is this one. If I go through again and we can go through to bass. Let's just pick that one. And as I start moving things, you can see I'm going to move this second one here, and this is mod amount. You've got this one here, which is the volume on the second mixer. So you can start to see what it's moving, and then of course what you can adjust. It obviously works really, really well with Analog Lab, because with Analog Lab it's across the board and it's the same. However, if I go back and I go, right, well, we've got tracks on here, we're going to mute that one and we're going to solo that one. It works. It works really, really well. The other thing as well is when you're in this mode right now with your digital audio workstation, then the faders and the dials suddenly then become the faders of the volume of the track, and then the dials actually become the pan. So I'll just move my mouse out of the way. There we go. And you can see the pan on channel 1 there, and I can see a representation of it here, and then we can see the volume here sliding up and down. If I press X on Logic Pro, I can see the mixer, which is cool because obviously I can then start messing around with it and see it how I want to. This is brilliant, and I love this about this section of it, because I can then adjust depending on what I'm doing. I can play around with this right here. I don't have to buy a separate mixer. I don't have to go into sitting there playing with the mouse all the time, or just adjust things. I can adjust things as I want to right here. Really, really smart. So the question is, what do I think of this? Well, you've probably guessed. I really, really like it. I like the keyboard. It's ever so slightly stiffer than the Mark II. Maybe that's because I've had it for 4 years. I don't know. But it is a redesigned keyboard. Love these pads, and I've wanted these pads on the Mark II for ages. Ever since I saw them on the Essentials, these are really, really nice. I really like the touch on the fader and the dial. That is a clever move. And actually, by taking the buttons away here, it simplifies the process, because it means that you're only really looking at what you need. The selection tools you don't need, because you can just click on here and you can search the way you want to, as if you were searching on the app itself, which is really clever. And this full color screen makes it so easy to navigate around. But also in a digital audio workstation environment, it works really well because it is the central piece for you to use. And I like the fact that you can just sit there and use it without having to sit there with the mouse and look at the screen and go, oh, that's the one I want, dial, dial, dial. Now you're doing it here, and it reminds me so much of a performance keyboard in this mode, like Astrolab, when you're using it in that mode. Now on Arturia's website, it's all in euros, and the Mark III 49 comes in at 449 euros, and for 100 euros more, you're getting the 61 note version. Now, for example, on the Thomann website in British pounds, the 49 note one comes in at 379, and the 61 note comes in at 469. I think that is a decent price for a keyboard of this caliber. I'd like to thank Source Distribution and Arturia, obviously, for sending this out to me. There's links in the description box if you want to go and pick one of these up at some different places. Obviously, they are affiliated links. If you click it, it does help out the channel, but at no expense to you. Now, this is their flagship MIDI controller. However, if you're in the market for a MIDI controller and you don't want to spend that amount of money, then what you need to do is have a look at Arturia's Essential keyboard. And we did a video all about this. This is the Essential 49 Mark III. Look at the keypads, by the way. And you have a look at the video that's just come up on screen, because that is this.